Hello, seniors. You're almost at the end of the road. And before we send you out into the world, the Landon administration has wisely decided that you all should know some of the 25 things that all people who are trying to adult, as you all are, on the planet should know. And one of those things is how to make a simple meal. And together with Ms. Howe, she and I are going to help you do a meatloaf, mashed potato, and roasted veggie dinner. Okay, so I'm going to do the meatloaf part of it, and we're going to start by showing you the ingredients, okay? So what you'll need is about 2.5 pounds of ground beef. You'll need a half a cup of ketchup, 2 eggs, half cup of breadcrumbs. You'll need salt and pepper. Salt is 2 teaspoons, 1 teaspoon of pepper, and 1 teaspoon of chopped thyme leaves. Now, thyme is an interesting herb. If you buy it fresh or if you have some in your herb garden, you'll need to take it off of the stem because the center stem can be a little wiry. If you have fresh, young thyme, you won't have to take it off of that stem. If you want to substitute dry thyme, you'll need 1/3 of this. So you'll need 1/3 of a teaspoon of thyme. Then over here, you'll see I have some wet ingredients. They're going to go into the pan with the onions when I sear them off. I've got 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. I've got a tablespoon of ketchup, and I've got 1/3 of a cup of chicken stock. And here's a little secret for you. It's important to know that when you are getting your 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, to take off this little flow reducer, just by kind of peeling it off like that, that way you can actually pour the Worcestershire sauce. If you try to do 3 tablespoons shaking through there, it'll take about a half hour to get 3 whole tablespoons. Then, and this is one of the key ingredients, 3 cups of chopped onion. Now, I'm also going to show you, this is a bonus piece of the video. Not everyone will show you how to chop an onion, but Ms. Howe and I decided that this is a really important thing for all adults to know how to do correctly, because there is a right way and a wrong way to do onions. You start, so this is the root end, and this is the stem end. You cut off the stem end. That gives you access to a flat surface. Now you can actually cut through the root end, just like that, and that helps you peel off the layer of onion that you're not going to use. And sometimes it's 1 layer, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3 layers, depending on how old your onion is. And I actually only need this much more to add to some onions that I've already chopped off camera. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna stand it just like this, and you're gonna be careful not to get your fingers involved in this. Go down through the, oh, just kidding. You're gonna go down through there about 3 times, and then flip it onto its flat side. Then chop little straight lines through the onion, making sure to also get the edges, okay? Then you're going to come down through it this way, and look, you've got little pieces of onion, and you don't have to stand there chopping and chopping and chopping, trying to get everything the right size. If you do it this way, you'll get the right size chopped onions every time. And most chefs, if you watch the cooking shows, they throw this little nub part away. I don't like to waste it, so I just kind of chop away at the sides, and then I end up with just this little piece that you can then recycle, compost, do whatever you'd like to do with it. All right, sometimes you end up with a little piece like that, and you just gotta chop it up, but then I've got all of my onions ready to go, all right? So then we're gonna take these onions, we're gonna bring them over to the stovetop. I'm gonna get this non-stick pan just piping away. And you shouldn't add cold oil to a cold pan. You should add cold oil to a hot pan. So we're gonna let that heat up just a little bit before adding the onions. This is a recipe that I found on Food Network. This is an Ina Garten recipe if you wanted to reference it. She's a great cook. I trust everything that she does. And this is pretty much a standard recipe. She has some interesting innovations in there that help increase the moisture content. If you've ever sliced into a piece of meatloaf when it was very dry, this one's not going to be dry at all. This has a lot of moisture in it from the onions and also from the chicken stock and also from the eggs. The purpose of the egg is so that the loaf will actually stick together. If you've ever scrambled an egg, you know that it goes from like that kind of gelatinous material and then it cooks up into this hard scrambled egg. And that's what helps hold together the meatloaf. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the olive oil in there. That was a generous tablespoon, let's call it. Make sure you move it around the pan a bit. Toss in your onions. Then you're gonna let this cook until translucent. That means that you're not gonna cook them the whole way through because this is then gonna go into the oven. So you're really you're sauteing them, but it's also called par cooking, so that you don't throw raw onions in your meatloaf into the oven. What you'll end up with is half-cooked onions that are kind of crunchy and a little bit too strong. This allows it to maintain the flavor and also be cooked by the time you take it out of the oven. Okay? So you're just going to give these a little shake. And then we'll see you in a couple minutes when these are ready to add to the mix. All right? Okay. And so this is the translucent onions. You can see they've gone from that kind of pure chalky color to this nice kind of glossy, translucent or partly clear consistency. I'm going to go ahead and add in the Worcestershire, the chicken stock, and the tomato paste. You don't want to ever use raw tomato paste in anything. You do have to cook it because it has a very kind of raw tasting flavor. Giving it a little cook like this in these onions and in the liquid takes away that raw flavor and just kind of leaves you with that deep umami essence of tomato. And it also will give that meatloaf a nice kind of reddish orange cast to it. A lot of recipes call for ketchup in the meatloaf mix itself. This recipe takes a little bit different tack and gives you that rich tomato flavor through the paste instead of through the ketchup. The ketchup will still be in there, but just on top. So the next step is to use this kind of wet onion mixture. We're going to transfer that into our mixing bowl. My mother always says, waste not, want not. So we're going to use every little bit of those onions. I'm going to gently beat up these eggs. Now I don't want to put the eggs right on top of the hot onions. Does anyone know why? Because they'll cook, and we don't want them to partially cook. So we'll wait on that a second. I'll mix in my spices, my pepper, my thyme, and my salt. Get my ground beef right there, in there. Start to break that beef up a little bit, because what you're going to do in a minute here is get your eggs mixed into the mixture. My mother always did this part with her hands. Still does this part with her hands. But since the onions are kind of hot still, I wouldn't recommend that for this particular recipe. Also going to get those breadcrumbs in there. And now that those onions have cooled down a little bit, and you've got the ground beef right there to help cool it down, you can go ahead and add the eggs. Then you're going to take a fork and you're going to just mix this around. don't mash it. You're kind of trying to lightly mix this. If you overwork the meat, it kind of gets tough. And if you've ever had tough meatloaf, you know that that's a terrible little sadness that can happen to your loaf. All right, once I have this all mixed up, I'll see you over at the pan where we can shape our loaf. And here we are at the last step right before it goes into the oven. You're gonna take that mixture that you've very lightly mixed with a fork. You can see it's really light. My hands are clean, by the way. Cleanliness next to godliness. These are your best tools in the kitchen. You're gonna take this and bring it onto your sheet pan, which I've already lined with non-stick foil. You can also use parchment paper. Those are the only two things I would really recommend is foil or parchment. And then you're gonna take this and you're gonna form it essentially into a rectangular loaf. Now a lot of recipes will actually have you put this right into a bread loaf pan, and you're certainly welcome to do that if that's the shape that you're used to. What I have experienced with those loaves actually in a bread loaf pan is that the grease just kind of sits there and cooks into the meat, and it's a really greasy piece of meatloaf. This way, the grease can actually just bake out of it onto the sheet pan, and then you can lift this entire thing once it's all cooked onto a cutting board, and then you can cut it into slices and serve your family and wow them with this whole loaf out of the meatloaf pan. So that is our rectangular, essentially, loaf, right? You can tighten it up a little bit. The higher it is, it's kind of more impressive. And then, once you've done that, and you've washed your hands, someone count 20 COVID seconds for me. I've become a master hand washer during all this. The quarantine. I like to call it that because it reminds me of Valentine. It sounds like something nice. All right, and you're going to take this lovely, you're gonna slide it into the oven. You'll notice at the bottom of the oven, I've got a bread loaf pan, ironically, with about 2 or 3 inches of water in it. Oh, I forgot a step. Wait, Bobby. Here's the ketchup sitting right here, and I totally forgot. You spread the ketchup.
You don't want to forget that.
No. Spread that ketchup. This is a half cup of ketchup, remember? Please use Heinz. There's no other ketchup, honestly. If you know, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I have to say that. Helps the local economy. All right, so now we're gonna put this in the oven. And you'll notice, like I said, there's a pan of water at the bottom. It keeps the meatloaf from cracking on the top. The ketchup's also there to kind of hide it if it does crack a little bit. But this is a homey meal, and if it cracks, don't worry about it. But it's gonna be beautiful. It will go in there for about an hour to an hour and a quarter, and we will see the finished product in a little bit. See you in a minute. Hey guys, so the meatloaf has been in for about an hour and 20 minutes. It took a little longer than I was expecting. It might be because my oven runs a little cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and take it out and see what we've got. And there's your meatloaf. So what you'll want to do is make sure that it's done, which means you want to check it with a meat thermometer. If you don't have one of these, it's probably not going to hurt you if you don't get it to the right internal temperature. But the internal temperature should read about 160. And I'm at about 165, 171. So this little guy is done. These can be found for $16.99 on Amazon.com. And you can serve it on this tray. This, we're not fancy here. You can just slice it right up, but you should serve it hot. Or you could wow your family by lifting it from this tray onto a beautiful prepared serving platter. Wow. If you can see a little crack, you can fix it with some of the ketchup. And Ms. Howe will probably love to have you serve your roasted vegetables surrounding the meatloaf and make it be a one-stop shop for your fancy but easy family dinner. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope your meatloaf turns out as nice as this one looks. I can't wait to dig into it. Talk to you later.